will be able to see us. How's your day been? Well,
Good, good. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
still
No, what time is it there?
well for me. It's 5 p.m.
All right. So we are 12 o'clock. So I just did my service
Mm,
online, and now just ready to kick it.
awesome, awesome. Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce the episode to everyone, and then we'll hop into the interview if that's fine.
That's good.
So hello everyone, welcome to hashtag Faith Talk. We're starting a new season, and I left the last episode on a little bit of a cliffhanger because I said I might not be able to do the podcast until after lockdown, but obviously lockdown is still going. So I thought, you know what, let's just get straight back to it. So here we are, season 2 of the podcast, and this is hashtag Faith Talk, where we talk about various experiences from different people. I interview different people that I meet about their faith journey and what they believe and how their faith has impacted all aspects of their life, including their everyday lives, their careers, and their views on political issues and all sorts of other things. So today, we have an amazing guest who reached out to me via email, and his name is Michael Arterberry. Michael, if you could just introduce yourself to the listeners, just so that they know who you are, because I think you can give a better introduction of yourself than I can.
Hey, well, my name is Michael Arterberry. I'm a motivational speaker. Also, I have my own nonprofit organization where I work with young people, where I bring a program into high schools. You know, my drive and my foundation as far as helping people is rooted in the fact that I came and grew up in a home. I had an alcoholic dad,
Mm,
a raging alcoholic father, and I say raging because he raged from the time I was born
wow.
right up until the time he died when I was 16. So,
Mm,
growing up, I never really had that stability. Um,
mm,
as far as money wise, both my parents worked full time, but my mom cleaned houses. My father was a bus driver, but his money went to drinking and hanging out in the streets. So my mother raised 4 kids
wow.
with a housekeeper's salary. As far as dysfunction, when you live in an environment like that, the dysfunction was going on in my home, but also in my neighborhood. All of
Yeah.
my friends had similar homes like mine. So, you had crime, drugs, gangs and those things of that nature. But, fortunately, I never fell victim to it. And that's what pushes me to want to help people.
Mm, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, um, that links very well to the first question I want to ask you in terms of your upbringing. So, if you could just expand even more on, just number one, the area that you grew up in and how your environment also contributed to bringing and how you dealt with those things as well.
Well, where I lived at, it was funny. It was the hood, so it was everybody really didn't have money, but I was fortunate enough where my parents worked full time, so I didn't go to school in my neighborhood. So
Mm,
I was able to go to school where my dad drove the bus, which was for a more affluent neighborhood. So I got to during the day escape
mm,
and go to this school where people had money and their lives were a lot different. And so it gave me respite from where I grew up. But where I grew up, my house, the guy that owned it was a slumlord. So my mother would pay rent, but he
mm,
wouldn't fix anything up. You know what I'm saying? I remember we had a basement where he would allow like the bums, the guys that drink on the street in the wintertime, he would let them just camp out in my basement. So imagine growing up, I would have these rowdy drunks, man, like living in my basement. I remember one vivid memory I have as a kid is I remember I lived in between two apartment buildings. And I remember this motorcycle gang came to my block and they were looking for one of my buddy's brothers. And so we were out in the courtyard playing. So imagine all these motorcycles pull up, these guys jump off their bikes, and then they ran up the stairs to the apartment, and you can see them hitting each floor, and then you can hear him yelling in the apartment, and then the next thing you know, they had his brother out on the courtyard, and they beat this man almost to death right in front of me. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I was about 10. I was about 10 years old, but that was like, you would hope that was traumatic, but unfortunately, around where I lived at, the violence wasn't regular. But when it would happen, it would happen enough where that didn't really throw me. And I'll finish with this. As far as my home, my dad was not physically abusive to his kids, but he was physically abusive to my mom. So being a male child, it was really tough having to watch that growing up.
Wow, that sounds powerful. So, um, how did this affect you as a young man in terms of your ambitions for life and your own perspective of your own life? How did it shape you as a man growing up?
Well, what it did is it first and foremost set in motion the fact that I wanted to break a cycle. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't want, as I'm growing up and I'm watching all this craziness, my objective was to make sure that I didn't repeat what I came from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Sometimes my motivation would be my unborn children. I would think about the kids that I was going to eventually bring into this world.
yeah,
And when they were to come into this world, I didn't want them to have to go through what I went through. So sometimes where, the decisions were rough, not to the point of criminal mischief or anything, but when I was feeling like I ran out of gas, I used my unborn children to push me. You
yeah.
know what I'm saying? But my ultimate goal was to be different than what I grew up in. So that's what I strive for. And those are the goals that I set for myself as I grew older.
Mm, that's awesome. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just gonna get my headphones quickly, and then we'll carry on.
Yeah, yeah, that's all right, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah. But in the meantime, to those listening on YouTube, please drop down some comments, as or any questions you want either Michael or myself to answer. So in the meantime, once I get my headphones, guys, if any of you are watching, drop some comments about either Michael's life or any of his work. And maybe you could answer those whilst I'm gone. I'll be only gone for a few seconds anyway. Otherwise, we can address those questions towards the end of the interview. So I'll be back with you in a little bit, guys. See you in a bit, Michael. I'll just get my
Yeah, all right.
Okay, I'm back.
All right.
Awesome. Okay. So, um, yeah, so just take us through your teenage years, and how you navigated sort of, was there any turning point, particularly you talked about trying to break the cycle. At what point in your life did you feel that, you know what, I have to break the cycle, and what was the first step that you took in kind of trying to do that?
Well, you know what protected me was the fact that I was blessed to be I was an elite athlete.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? So I played basketball, baseball, football, and soccer. And my mother got me involved in I was an elite athlete. You see what I'm saying? So I played basketball, baseball, football, and soccer. And my mother got me involved in was something that allowed me to continue to strive, which you would get from a healthy family structure. And so I was able to live in that chaos that I mentioned, but I was not it didn't really disturb who I was because it kept me focused. My dream was to be a professional athlete. um, Football was my favorite out of those sports, so I targeted football. I ended up going to college to play football. um, but I didn't end up on a professional football field. I ended up going to college to become a social worker, and I took that skill that I had as a social worker, and that's when I started the fruits or the beginning of getting into working with young people and working with them to motivate them to be successful themselves. Nathan, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Your audio went. Your audio. Talk, speak.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yeah, there you go. There you go.
Okay, nice. Okay, cool. So okay, I'll leave my earphones out for now, just to keep on the safe
Oh,
side.
that's what happened? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when I put my headphones in, there's some options that come up as to what I've plugged in. I think I selected the wrong option and the microphone got affected. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, but okay, that's fine. Okay, so you started getting into youth work. You started having a passion for it. Um, were you growing up in New York at this time? Have you been in New York your whole life, or were you living somewhere else initially?
No, I grew up in it's called Westchester. It's right outside the city, which was growing up. It's funny because you can get some of the city life, but then at the same time you get more of more of the country type life. So we pop into the city if you wanted to get some excitement. But
Mm.
I was growing up in New York. Um, and when a hood is you say your hood, I mean everybody has their hood.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. I mean it's I can say I grew up in the hood, but I grew up in the neighborhood. Even though it may have been dysfunctional in some ways, um, in neighborhoods like that, they're more like families. So a lot of the people that I grew up with, I may not be in contact with them on a regular basis, but they follow me on Facebook, and anytime we see anything that either one of us are doing, we support each other and reach out. So yeah, I grew up in a town called New Rochelle. It's about I say about 35, 45 minutes outside of New York City. Yes. It's our youth. The organization is called Youth Voices Center. Yeah, yeah. And I created that. I first created a youth development program which I call Power of Peace. And it's a program that I bring into high schools. And it's a 4-day program, but it's done 2 days at a time. And the program's built where I bring like 30 kids into a room. And when I go to the school, I ask for a cross section. So those 30 kids are made up of white, black, Latino, rich, poor. And I put them in a room and I run them through a 2-day experience where they get to know each other, but at the same time get to know themselves on a personal level. And I do that through an experiential experience. So there are activities where I don't force them, but I walk them through being able to look at their lives. And what I believe is that when we go through life, we step on landmines, but we don't blow up. So imagine you going through life, you step on a landmine, you don't blow up, but damage occurs. And you don't realize that the damage occurs, and you keep going through life, and your decisions are based on the damage that occurred at the landmine, but you fall past that. And so you start to structure a life around a landmine that happened to you at like 7. You're now 25 years old and you're making decisions from something that happened to you at 7. So at high school, I want them to start to get perspective on what happened to me in life, and am I making decisions based on something that happened in my past that should not be affecting my future. So I bring them together and they do that. And then at the same time, they get to interact and learn each other and break down barriers.
Awesome. Awesome. And can you start to talk us through so I mean, how long have you been doing these workshops now? Let's get some perspective. So what year did you found the Youth Voice Center, and just how much experience have you had from that?
Well, I started it in 2008 is when I originally started it. I had like 4 schools, and now I've expanded, and I'm not, I think about 7 or 8 schools. I do some staff development with some schools where I don't go in and work with the students, but I work with teachers. You know what I mean? And the work is great. It's great in the sense of what's going on in our culture right now with the racism and the different races. See, my program, the main objective of my program is to set up an environment so that these young people can discuss and have dialogue so that they don't feel like they're so different. And what happens after my process is that these teenagers realize, like I do an activity with them. Check this out. I do an activity with them, which I call concentric circles. So imagine you got an inside circle and an outside circle. And I give them 5 questions, and they're going to talk to 5 different people. So the first question is a person you respect and why you respect them. The second question is qualities that you look for in a friend. The third question is, if you had the power to change something in the world, what would it be and why? The fourth question is a time you felt most hurt by someone you trusted. And the final question is a time that you lost someone you really cared about. And so they answer those 5 questions. I rotate them 5 times. Now, remember, they're talking to people that they don't normally really hang out with. So after they do the 5 questions, I do my whole program in a circle. I pull them out into the circle. And then before we go on, I just ask them, do you feel that? And they'll be like, yeah. And what happens after that, bro, is that the whole room shifts. The energy in the room changes because all these students that came from different walks of life became transparent, and their transparency created an environment that made them feel like they was like family. You know what I'm saying? So, and then we go through that for the 2 days. I keep doing activities that keeps opening their eyes to the fact that we're not white, black, Latino, we're human first.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said there. And all those questions are fundamental questions valuable at any point in life, whether you're a young person or an adult. Life is a busy thing, and especially a lot of us living in Western society, we get lost in the speed of it all, and we don't take the time to ask ourselves the fundamental questions of what's my purpose, um, what am I actually working towards? A lot of us just have in mind things like, oh, we want the ideal job or we want the money, but then once we get to the money, it's like, then what? We have
Right.
these goals, but we don't have a bigger picture for our lives. So when we reach certain goals and we don't get the satisfaction that we think we're gonna get, we hit a stumbling block, and then we that's when it's we're at like an existential crisis. Um, so it's great to hear that you ask these questions, and it's nice to hear that you're appealing to a wide range of young people as well, because I feel like unity is very important, and the whole purpose of the work I do and the podcast that I'm doing is to create dialogue between people who wouldn't normally be speaking to each other. So it's great to hear that. um, do you have any sort of outstanding memories of particular um, people or young people that you've worked with, and what's probably some of the best examples of the fruits that you've seen from your work with young people?
I got a few, but one that I like to share is I had a guy come into my group, and you got to imagine when he came in, he was a straight hardcore gangbanger. So he came into my room, and oh shoot, nah, hold on, give me a minute. There you go. Yeah. He came into my room. He was a hardcore gangbanger. And so he came in and he was resistant, you know what I'm saying? And so he's got his hands folded, but I was gonna give him a little bit of time because I felt like if he kept doing that, I was just gonna say, listen, you might as well just leave. But he was listening at the same time he had his hands folded. And you could see his body language was changing as he was going through the process. So he unfolded his arms and he was sitting. Then he started cracking a little smile here and there, and he's doing activities with these kids that are not gangbangers. Now remember, he's hardcore. And then finally, you know what I'm saying? Somewhere down the line, he kind of alluded to the fact that it was the first time he was in a group where he really felt loved, right? And when he said that, it was beautiful. It prompted the other kids in the group. I didn't tell them to do this, man. They got up and they all went over and started hugging him. And each time they would hug him, it would break him. And by the last person that hugged him, this dude was crying like a freaking baby, bro. You know what I'm saying? And so it showed that it was the first time he was in an environment where people really nurtured and cared for him. So, that was a really, really a good workshop. Then I had another one where a girl hadn't, 4 generations and they hadn't graduated high school. So, these people, her family really didn't set a good role model. I took her under my wing. She kind of became like my surrogate daughter. And, she pushed on and she graduated high school. You know what I'm saying? And so, you get these young people that, they come in and they're like sponges. I had one young lady who was she was a white girl, Caucasian girl, and she gets halfway through the group. Now she's in there with mixed cultures, and she stops the group and she says, "Listen, no disrespect, but if we wasn't in this room, I wouldn't talk to any of you." And like when she said that, everybody kind of looked at her crazy, but that's the truth. And the beauty of that was when she graduated and she went to her prom, her her prom bus was multicultural. So before she came to the group, her prom bus probably would have had nothing but white couples on it. But because she went through the process, she had everybody on the bus because it changed her as a person.
Um, and just out of interest, where did these young people come from? Were they referred to you, or how did they come across you? Because I'm sure a lot of them, their first preference wouldn't have been to come to a youth group. You know, some young people, the idea of a youth group kind of scares them, and you might have witnessed that when you meet some young people for the first time. Some might be reluctant, as you've given examples of. So, just out of interest, like, where are these young people coming from? Are they being referred? Are they choosing to come there by themselves? You know, what is the road to them trying to find a place at the youth center?
So what happens is when I go into the school, I meet with the principal first, and I explain to him that I want a cross section, so he knows I want what I want as far as the diversity. But then I also speak to some of the teachers, and so what they do is a teacher, believe it or not, is very aware of if a student needs a little something extra. So they start picking students that feel as if they need the extra resources. So sometimes a kid will come in resistant, but if I'm in a school long enough, they'll come because they get out of class for 2 days and I feed them. So sometimes they're coming for free food and not to go to class, which I love because they'll come in to get some free food and get out of class. And before they know it, they're like, oh, wow, man. And they'll tell you. They'll be like, listen, Mike, no disrespect. I came here to get some pizza and get out of class, but yo, you changed my life. You know what I'm saying? So, when I first come to a school, when they come in the room, I got the chairs set up in a circle. So the first thing they're like, oh, this is like, Alcoholic Anonymous. It's like one of those classes. But what I do first to disarm them is I tell my story, and what I do is I show them a picture of the house I grew up in. And if you see a picture of it, it looks condemned. Like if you see the picture of the house I grew up in, if you looked at the picture, you'd be like, nobody lived there. And I explained to him what it felt like to live in that house, and I walk him through it, the embarrassment and winters with no heat. And then after I explained that to him, I bust out the picture of where I live at now. Now, where I live at now, I pat myself on the back. There's nowhere like where I grew up. And then I put the pictures side by side. And so it creates a gap.
Mm.
And I explained to them that in between these pictures, a whole bunch of life went on. And what my program is made out of is the experiences between the pictures. And I explained to them that's what I want them to do. And so that disarms them and it makes them feel like this guy doesn't have me in a room sitting in a circle and he's just going to dig into my brain and not allow me, you know what I'm saying, to, give them the opportunity to do the same, to follow suit.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's great to see youth workers partnering with these institutions, partnering with schools, and partnering with these official organizations because um, yeah, I feel like we need to see more collaboration like that in society where institutions, the government is, you know, partnering with um, people who are in the field, and that can really help to bridge some gaps and to allow conversations that might be hard to happen. So that's great. Another thing as well is obviously you are a man of faith. You believe in the Lord. Do you want to just take us through your faith journey throughout your life and how what you've been through has impacted your faith when you became a Christian and how your faith helps you in your work as well?
Well, my mom was got me to go to church when I was growing up. She was a 7 Day Adventist. So if you know anything about that faith, they worship the Sabbath is Saturday, So as a kid, I wasn't crazy about it. So sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, I couldn't do anything. Couldn't watch cartoons. I couldn't leave my house. And so to me, it wasn't a religion. It was prison, And so I grew up resistant to it. But I went to church right up until I was about 12. And then one day, that alcoholic father came home, tore up the house, and said, "Don't you ever bring him up there anymore." Now, I don't know where he got it from, but all of a sudden, he didn't want me to go to the church anymore, so my mother stopped bringing me. And I ended up stepping away from that, but always believed in God because I had been going to church for so long. As I grew up, I started going to college, hanging out and partying. But I always remember as I was growing up, even if I came home drunk, before I went to bed, I'd get on my knees and I'll pray before I go to sleep. It was like ingrained in me. And so I had this really crazy, in my mind, relationship with God. I didn't speak to him. We really didn't talk, but I knew he was there. I remember having a job and a lady was Christian and she would always want to talk to me about God. And I always would tell her, listen, there's going to be a day we can have this conversation, but right now I'm not ready. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew the commitment that it is to give your life to Christ. And then, bro, my best friend was getting married and he and his wife wanted to kind of purify themselves before they got married, so they got baptized. And I went to the baptism, and when they dipped him into the water, it was like they dipped me in the water, bro. When they pulled him up, it's like they pulled me up. I walked out of that church, man. They talk about how you have your experience with God. I used to wear jewelry. I took my jewelry off. I started diving into tapes. Back then, I'm a little older, so they had the cassette tapes and the CDs, you know what I'm saying? And I just started to drown myself in resources. And, when I first became Christian, I was terrible because I tried to be perfect. And if you wasn't Christian, I didn't want to hear anything you had to say. You know what I'm saying? And
how old were you when you became a Christian, just out of interest?
I was like, let's say I was like 27.
Okay, so a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah. I was 27, and so at first I was over the top, and then I started to find balance, man. You know what I'm saying? I started to find balance, and so when you say how it affects my current life, now it's a whole different story. You know what I'm saying? Because I now understand it. I now commune and have a personal relationship with God. So, all the success, if you go to any of my Facebook pages, anything you see happening in my life, I now know why it happened. It's not me. I take no credit for my success. None. Wow. You know what I'm saying? God has created me to be his vessel on this earth, and that's how I operate. I get up every morning. I spend time with him first. Every day. So this is not like Monday and then Tuesday I'm tired and I don't do it. I start every single one of my days with my time with God, and then I go into my day. And what I do during the day is when you spend time with him regularly, his voice becomes audible. In the Bible, it talks about the Holy Spirit. So as I'm walking through the day, it's not like I'm talking to somebody so you think I'm crazy. But every move I make, the Holy Spirit just will adjust me, man. You know what I'm saying? And so, the power that I have in my groups and my motivation type of work is that I quiet my spirit so that I can hear the Holy Spirit. And it gives me some supernatural power sometimes, bro, where if I'm listening to what you say, I'm able to take what you said and get insight on just your words to a level where you would be like, yo, how did he know that? And it's because of the fact that I spend that time with God. So, my relationship and my faith, if I was allowed to put it out first, in the world, which you can't do because some people will condemn you for it, but that is the catalyst and the root and the foundation to every successful thing I have in my life.
That's amazing. And I imagine, obviously, when you do your youth work, you have to be careful with, how not being too forceful with your faith. And so, just in general, how have you find navigating that? Because for me, as a young person as well, I think a lot of issues with young people stem down to purpose. I mean, I'm sure you will agree with that. Is purpose, right? It's a sense of a lack of purpose, and as a young person, you're trying to find your place in the world. That's why you're trying all these different things. You're going out with your friends. You're trying to go clubbing, trying this, trying that, because you're trying to find your purpose. So, um, as for me, like, I mean, I grew up in a Christian family, so I guess this is something that I've always known. But when I look at a lot of my friends at uni, at college, at school, I see, young people who, in a sense, haven't been as privileged as me because they're still trying to find a concrete sense of purpose, something that they're living for. So that's why they're trying all these different things. And obviously, as a little kid, I was like, I saw it as a negative thing. I felt like I was in a cage, and I was like, oh, how come my friends get to do that and I don't get to do X, Y, Z? But now, obviously, now that I'm older, I understand um, sort of the principles behind that, and I thank God for the godly parents who have raised me. But yeah, purpose is a big thing. How are you able to help young people find their purpose without necessarily always talking about God or faith or spiritual things? How do you sort of navigate that?
Listen, it's on how you live.
Mm,
It's how you live. So
that's good.
check this out. The beauty of when you commune, spend time with God, and you live by His principles. I don't have to tell you I'm Christian. You see what I'm saying? So what happens with people, and I love it when it happens. I'm spending time with somebody, and then all of a sudden, you know, um, say, yo, there's something different about you. And don't say that because now you open up the door. Or I'll go or I'll go somewhere, right? What I love is like I'm at the mic, I finish speaking, and then if it's at a school, a teacher will creep up to the podium and she'll say, she'll drop like a cue word to let me know she's Christian herself. And I'd be like, how'd you know? And she says, God's signature is written all over everything you do. So, when you want to make people understand what is your power in your center, if you walking right and you walking in your purpose, it makes them crave and want a piece of what you have. You see what I'm saying? So when you get up the courage to ask me, yo, what is it about you? Then I get to lay it on you. You know what I'm saying? My peace of mind and my swagger comes from the God that I believe in. You know what I'm saying? And so, when I'm in places and I can't say his name, I listen to a speaker, and what he calls God is the manufacturer, and he calls people the product. So anytime I want to drop it in a secular environment, I call God the manufacturer and I call myself the product. So I say the manufacturer created me, and then you have to go into your mind. But I'll finish with this, bro. The beauty of my own business is the fact that I can say whatever I want to. Now, I don't want to walk into a room and offend people and just blast them with godly things. But if I slip and I say it, the beauty of having my own program is don't come. If you don't want me in your building, kick me out. But you can't censor what I say because it's mine.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And everything you just said, I believe I resonate with a lot because I myself, I'm a creative person. So I've just finished my degree studying animation. I'm into filmmaking. I'm into music. Into poetry, podcasting as well. So I have a huge passion for creating resources and creating content that I do want to speak to people who are non-Christian as well. And it's an interesting thing because when you when you're just good at what you do, that in itself gets people's attention. There's a lot of things I post on Instagram. So a lot of them are faith related, some of them are not. Um, but I just make sure that everything I do is top quality. So when I do songs, I make sure that the lyricism is strong. I make sure that the production quality is good. Um, and a lot of the time, I have quite a few people who follow me on Instagram, and from time to time they message me. They might not have the same spiritual or religious views as I do, but they say that they enjoy the content I make, and they just like listening to me. They might not always agree with me, but they just respect who I am because I'm good at what I do, and I show an appreciation and understanding for people. So I definitely resonate with all you just said, and I think it's good that you are here to talk about that in particular because um, I look up to Christians who have their own companies, and I think we need to see more of that, more Christians who are engaging in the wider world, having their own corporations, but at the same time, um, you know, like finding ways to speak to people from other schools of thought, and I think that's great. So yeah, I mean, I even saw your website. It looks loaded with amazing content, and um, and what's the staff like? Do you have a lot of staff in the organization, or is it just a small number of you? And how have they helped you to continue? Because I feel like um, a lot of people need to understand the importance of teamwork and collaboration, especially when you're doing something that God has called you to. God will send you people to help you in your calling and in your journey. So just share what that has been like in your experience.
Well, I'm very protective of it,
Mm,
and so I do all the work.
okay.
Every school that I go into, I lead facilitated, but over the years, I've had people to assist me. Um, and I'm a firm believer in that people come into your life for a season, for a reason, or a lifetime. You see what I'm saying? And so, a lot of times I would hire young people that I've interacted with when they were younger. And so I've give them a job as an opportunity to kind of get into a place where they're striving to get better. And then once they get on their feet and they find their career path, they kind of move on and do what they really were setting out to do. But I do all the work not because I'm a control freak, but because the integrity of what I do, I want it to be sound. So when people speak of my program, I can guarantee you that you can call up, and I mean, this is like a challenge. You can call any school I've ever been in, and they know that it was quality, well delivered, and it was something that the kids benefited from. See, I don't have to worry about Jimmy that went over there to the other school for me, and he didn't land he didn't deliver the program like I did. So, people sometimes come at me because they feel like people want to take it and grow it big and make a lot of money, but I'm not in it to make a lot of money. See, you know what I'm saying? Like for me, I'm not, if I can make a lot of money, but then it destroys the integrity of what I do. So I call it control growth. You know what I'm saying? But I tell you this, with the virtual, having COVID, I've put together an online course and I've been doing some things virtual. So once this bad boy lifts, I got some other streams of money, so I can still have the control growth on the outside, but I can have the virtual things moving at the same time.
Awesome. So um, let's talk. So alongside doing your youth work, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've also done some motivational speaking as well. Um,
Right.
so yeah, can you just take us through your motivational speaking journey?
I got
Start
something
doing that
straight to money
after.
so I can still have the control.
Wait, sorry, hang on.
Go from the outside, but I.
Sorry, I was playing the live video on YouTube, so it interfered.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, just talk us through your motivational speaking journey,
Have the virtual things moving at the same time.
and
Well,
yeah, awesome.
so the motivational speaking I do, it's a byproduct of the program. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, before I go in to do my program, I speak to the entire school so that the entire school has the language of what I'm going to talk about with the individual kids when they come to my group. You see what I'm saying? So I speak to the students, I speak to the teachers, and then I speak to sport teams. You know what I'm saying? I get called in a lot to speak to school staffs, teachers. You know what I mean? To motivate and get them focused on what their goal is. But my motivational speaking really was birthed through my nonprofit, because I'm actually motivational speaking throughout the process of when I'm doing my program.
And on odd occasions, have you been invited to speak in other settings like churches or speaking to other types of audiences and people? And if so, how has that been for you as well?
Well, I get even though there's schools, I've done a lot of commencement speeches, so graduations for different high schools, which that is an honor. You know what I mean? It's an honor to be able to speak to a high school when the students are graduating and moving on to the next chapters of their lives. In the church, I was part of the youth ministry of my church. So I spoke regularly to the youth of my church. Um, you know, as far as speaking in more venues, that's one of my goals. You know what I mean? I think that is that. No, not I don't think I know. What I would like to do is to have more opportunities to speak on stage to other audiences besides those that come through my nonprofit. So, if you were to ask me what would I like to do in an extension of what I do now, it is to get on more platforms and stages that are not connected to the nonprofit.
Awesome, that's good. Yeah, I feel like um, every now and again it's good to, and again, obviously the primary thing is it something God wants you to do? God sometimes might ask us to move on to something else, um, or He might ask us to just stay where we are. And you come across as the sort of person who's very focused on where God wants you to be at the moment. So if He says go here, then you're passionate about changing your plans to fit around God's plan for your life. Um, so that's good. Good. Another thing I wanted to talk about was obviously the current climate that we're in. Racism has always been going on for many centuries, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about your experience of um, being a black man in America, and I'll also share my experience as well. But I think one thing that we need to make clear is actually, as black people, we just within like the term black as well is very vast. There's black people with various experiences. Not every black person has the same experience. Some black people have had very privileged lives where they've experienced no close to no prejudice. For me personally, I can't remember a particular moment where someone was blatantly racist to me. But maybe a lot of that is to do with just British culture in general. You might be aware that as most British people conserved, we don't like to speak too much. if we're if we're being unkind to someone, it's more through um, like an indirect sort of way.
Right.
Americans tend to be more direct, and so there's various cultural um, impacts on different black people's experiences of racism. But just speak through how a black man in America, and um, what's your experience been like personally?
Wow, bro. You know what this George Floyd's death has done is we've been taught to be silent about it, man. So it's rare that it's now a climate where I just get to talk about it. My man, I'm 52 years old, and you have no idea how it's been being a black man in America, bro. And people that know me and that may be listening to it, no, I'm not one of those guys that run around. You know, I don't want any hand-me-downs. No, I don't want you to give me anything. So my stories are not about the fact that I want somebody to feel sorry for me, but I've had people really try to put me in a box, man. Or just use. So an example. Let me give you an example. So my program is an intellectual property, right? So I went to a training to learn how to license my intellectual property, which is my program, which is called Power of Peace. But I had to go to a library in the hours before it opened to gain access to the training. So when I go to work, my uniform for work is a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. I'm laid back. So I show up to the library. I'm walking in to go to the conference. There's a security guard at the desk. And when I walk in, two white women walk in front of me. He don't say nothing to them, but when I pass him, he says, "Where are you going?" So I'm like, so it's early in the morning. He's asking me where I'm going. So, I'm mad, but I'm like, you know what? When you black, now see, this is what you get trained in also. So now that he's confronted me, I now have a choice. I can either fire back, and if I take it up too high, I get labeled the angry black man, and I may not even get inside the building. So I said, you know what? I want this training, so I'm gonna play it cool. I said, yo, I'm here for the training. I played it real cool. I didn't make him look bad, and then I go inside. So you think it was over. Now I'm inside. I'm still messed up with this security guard, right? So I'm inside, and you have to raise your hand and tell them why you're there. So I raise my hand, and I'm talking about my program. Now, a week before, there was an article written in the newspaper. And part of my volunteer work, I do volunteer work in a maximum security prison in New York. So I just go in as a volunteer. I've never been to prison. I never was an inmate, but I go in to volunteer. So I raise my hand. I don't say any of that. I just talk about my program. So during the break, this white woman comes up to me and she's like, "I read about your article in the paper. I heard about the success your program is having." She said, "Where did you get out?" So she read an article that had all these accolades about how well I did. The only thing she could pull out of the article is that it said something about prison, and she assumed that I was a prisoner, bro. And it disturbed my spirit so bad. This is the part this is what people are talking about on TV. It disturbed my spirit so bad I left. I grabbed my briefcase, and now I left. I missed an opportunity to learn something because this woman came at me. Because now I'm mad. I really want to argue with her, but again, you have to be careful because if you mess around and you get too hot, they're calling the cops. They're coming in, they're cuffing me, and you don't know if they put their foot on my neck or their knee on my neck as well. So, I don't even allow that to be played into the equation. I got my stuff and I bounced.
Crazy. That's crazy. Like I it's just sad to hear, as human beings, we're so behind. Like,
Yeah.
even as I saw, someone sent me a message recently, and I think it was probably the first black student to be in an all white like school basically, and that woman is only like 65 years old at the moment.
Wow.
Like, wow, look at, like, just under 100 years ago. Think of the the crazy stuff that was happening, where black people were still considered subhuman. Segregation was, just a part of everyday life. So, as much as I also have my own things that I'm angry about in this day and age as a millennial, I can't imagine how bad things used to be even just before, the year 2000, even in the 60s and around, the civil rights era. um, the fight was at a whole other level. um, and so what is your perspective on, so your identity as a black person, did that kind of affect your perspective on Christianity, and the church that you grew up going to? Was it white majority, black majority? Just how did, just your racial experience impact your faith growing up as well, if there is any correlation?
Well, growing up, my mom's church was all black. You know, the unique thing about my story, and this is crazy. We're talking about race. My wife is Caucasian, so she's white. So once we got married and we wanted to go to church, we had to. I couldn't take her to the Baptist church, with the all black church. So what we found is we found a church that was, multicultural, born again Christians, and so it has all races. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to tell you something, man. And I won't mention church or whatever, but I will tell you this: that this whole issue that's going on in the world right now, all the undercover racist people, they're on notice because they see, they don't even realize it. Some people are so racist they don't even realize it. So all you gotta do is read their Facebook page. So people that you were eating lunch with and going to their house to have a barbecue with, you read their Facebook page, and you're like, whoa. So a couple of them, let me tell you, a couple people I had to comment, bro. I had a couple dudes that that I went to school with, that back in the day when people were like, I'm a big dude, right? So like I was always big. But so I had a choice to either be the dude that walk around and take people's lunches, you know what I'm saying? Or I could be the guy to protect people who got their lunches taken, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I was a gentle giant, bro. So like if anybody was ever made fun of and I heard it, I was the first one to be like, yo, leave him alone or stop bothering him. Yo, dude, a few of them dudes that I used to do that for, I'm looking at their Facebook page and I'm like, what?
Wow.
And I'm watching the rhetoric that they're putting, and I put in the comments like, yo, listen. I said, listen, I remember who you are. At least I remember who you were. You know what I'm saying? And I said, what's the problem? No, the problem is this, is that you are writing these comments, but you don't forget that this big black man for years protected you. So when I was protecting you, was I different then than I am now? No, I'm the same person. But see, there's people that before this ruckus had different points of view, but they kept them silent. And what's going to cause a problem, though, is the fact that once all this is over, or not over, is once COVID is over and you come back into a workplace, how do you go share an office with a dude that was putting that stuff all over his Facebook page during the whole time that this thing was hot? So it's going to be a challenge.
It is. I feel like 2020 is just a year of revelation. It's just layers of our society are just being revealed. You know, COVID isn't. It's just COVID-19 is just revealing who we are as human beings. That's what it's
Yeah.
is exposing our vulnerabilities, is exposing our prejudices, is exposing um, our materialism, how much we depend on things that now are not much of a use. Um, so I mean, it's a weird duality because for me personally, it's been one of the biggest blessings of my life because I've been able to spend I have the opportunity to spend more time with my family and just get to know them better and get to know myself better. Um, but also, obviously, one of the worst years of our lives as well because I feel it seems like people are tired. You know, we're tired of negativity, and you know, people are desperate for some sort of light or positivity, which I think is a factor contributing to just how angry people are about racism. You know, I don't think it's just how graphic the video of George Floyd's murder was. I think you know if this is years in the making. The pressure's been building up. We've been in this social media age. We've seen enough of these videos to be traumatized ourselves regarding you know the black injustices happening. But also on top of that, you know the whole strain of COVID-19 on various communities across the world is making people realize that unity is more important than ever. Just in general in our world, unity is more important, which I think is just I think another factor contributing to just the outcry against racism that we're seeing now. Um, what's your perspective on you know the Black Lives Movement at the moment, and you know when you see lots of people posting Black Lives Matter, and have you seen a lot of your white friends, for example, post about this, and have you been surprised by the sort of people who've been also joining this kind of um, outcry, so to speak?
Listen, let me tell you something. I posted something on my Facebook page. I woke up last Sunday and this had me feeling I was angry. I was angry and I wanted to put something out on my page. Didn't know really what was going to come out. And when it started out, and it ended up very productive because I was able to bring it back home to what I feel is important. And that is that we're all human. We're all humans. We bleed red. So that's how we should look at it. But the passion that came across in my video, the love that I got from my white friends, was it made me emotional, man, because I was getting phone calls and they're calling me up like, yo, what? Just what? I don't know. Just tell me what I need to do to make you feel better. And yo, man, it really warmed my heart. So,
Mm.
you know, when you say the response, you know, what makes this time different is that alone. Usually, if you saw the streets after a murder, it would be black people only. But what you see on the television now is a unified front, and that unity is speaking volumes. You know what I'm saying? You know, I think some people when they see Black Lives Matter, you know, some people that are ready to find some objective to it, they're not saying Black Lives Matter only. That's not, if they were trying to say Black Lives Matter only, they would put that at the end of the thing. But it doesn't say Black Lives Matter only. You know what I'm saying? It says Black Lives Matter. That's all we want you to hear. But see that again, that's the person that hears Black Lives Matter and throw the only on the end are the ones that are not really particularly ready for change. Because all they want is to get a place of an argument. One of the guys that I went out on Facebook, you know, all I said to him was, listen, black man got killed on he got murdered on national TV, bro. That right there is what the issue is. Because soon as that's the issue. But don't tell me but. You know what I'm saying? If I just told you that's the issue and you hit me with a but, I'm like, yo, we can't talk no more. We can't talk. And then this guy he went into his criminal record. What does his criminal record have to do with the fact that he got murdered on national TV? I mean, come on, bro. And so, you know, that gets me angry. That part gets me angry. Not Black Lives Matter only. They're just saying Black Lives Matter, you know? And what's crazy is that now you're seeing, or you don't see all these people that putting on TV that died with police brutality. But yo, if George Floyd didn't die, we wouldn't see this stuff, bro. So these people would be dying, no one would be putting it on the media, and so it would still be happening. So when they say Black Lives Matter, it's because we've been dying for years. It is just now being broadcasted. Yeah. But we've been dying for, yo, check this out. I'm 52 and I like old school rap. Yeah. In the 80s, in the 80s, bro, Tupac, Public Enemy. Yeah. These guys in the 80s, if you listen to their lyrics, they're talking about the same thing that's going on in 2020. So you talk about, you're talking about progress. And let me finish with this. Let me tell you something, bro. I was watching a movie called The Great Debaters. It's with Denzel Washington, and he's a teacher who teaches, he's a college professor who has a debate team, and they travel across the country to do debates. And I'm watching the movie, and as they're going through a debating, and it's in I don't want to get the year wrong, but maybe 30s. I mean, it was back when lynching was legal, put it that way. So I'm saying that to you because they're driving to do a debating contest, and on the way to the debating contest, they roll up on a white Klan who was lynching a black boy. So he had the college kids in the back. You know, they got this black man hung from a tree. They didn't just hang him, they lit him on fire as well. You know what I'm saying? And so they gotta watch this, bro. Now they can do this back in that time, and it ain't even a crime. So so to be able to do that, imagine, now I've seen that movie and I know that history. I watched that movie, know that history, and then I'm sitting on my couch and I watch George Floyd get killed. Dude, they did it back then in a tree, burning them up, and then this man, and then did you look in the eyes of the police officer? He was telling you. He was looking at the camera, he looked at the camera and he said, yo, listen, I'm killing this dude. And he not only did he say, I'm killing this dude. Officers as well. Just looking. I'm killing this guy, and not the worst part, I'm going to get off of it. The worst part is he says, I'm killing him, and he says, I'm killing him, and I know I'm going to get away with it. It's sad, bro. It's sad, and that's why people are angry.
And look at how much noise we had to make just an investigation to be followed through. Yeah. But something broke. When America, not blacks, when America watched that man get murdered, something in America broke. And that's why I'm saying my friends that are white, I've never had so much love. Because they understand, man. Something broke. Something broke, and something is broken, and it needs to be fixed. What do you hope the church does now? The amazing thing is, even in Britain, there's an outcry, right? And the thing is, as Black British people, we've also had our share of, young people who have died at the hands of police brutality. It hasn't been as much as in America, but we still resonate with the struggle in America in a deep way. You know, we still know what it's like to live in a predominantly white society, with negative stereotypes of black people, you know, brainwashing people all over the country. You know, we see institutional racism in our churches. We see institutional racism in our schools, in our school curriculums, who still choose not to cover Black history in an accurate way. You know, in school, I never got to learn about our ancestors. I never got to learn about how Black people contributed to the abolition of slavery and how we contributed in what the world wars. I didn't hear any of that. And the scary part is it was very normal to me. I never even questioned it. I just accepted this is just what life is. Life is predominantly controlled by a white narrative, right? So we get it in Britain, and there's still been loads of protests in the streets. I have Christian brothers and sisters who have, and you know, they've gone out into the streets marching, saying this is not just an American issue. This is a worldwide issue. So what this is also showing me is that Black people all over the world, we're connected, you know, and it's a weird way for us to be connected through our suffering, but in a way it's comforting because there's power in numbers, there's power in unity. When you realize as a Black person you're not the only one who's fighting, that there's people from other cultures all over the world and other countries and from other backgrounds who are also fighting the same fight, it empowers you. And so what do you hope the church is doing? Because for me, my church, and we didn't respond to it immediately, and that would mean that raised questions in my mind, like, do these guys really care about this issue the way us Black people do? But then I messaged one of the people in my church. He said, yes, we're on it, we're preparing something, because I don't know about you, but our church does pre-recorded services and then broadcasts it live on Sundays. So yeah, just this morning, okay, I'll be perfectly honest. Like, I thought they were going to touch on it in a lot more detail. There was a little prayer at the beginning about it, which I appreciate, but I thought there would actually be a discussion, or at least one Black member of the church, you know, giving their insight as well into how their white brothers and sisters could help them. You know, I thought they would do something like that, but they didn't. How's your church responded? Has there been a conversation in your church that's started regarding the way forward and how white members of the church need to really, it's really about the heart of Jesus, just having more of the heart of Jesus and having a passion to not only have the face value of inclusivity, but actually empowering Black people, helping Black people to attain leadership roles in the church, for example, or, you know, other practical steps of empowering Black people within the church. Has there been that conversation going?
Well, I'll tell you this, without getting into too many details, just in case, you know, I've seen something in my home church even during COVID, and then right before this issue, where, you know, I've been watching other pastors on TV. So really, my family now, we get up on Sunday mornings and we watch Bishop T.D. Jakes. I don't know if you know T.D. Jakes.
I know T.D. Jakes.
Yeah, T.D. Jakes. That's my man. That's he's my spiritual mentor, and he don't know it. You know what I'm saying? Like I listened to all of his stuff. I believe in his walk with Christ. I love him as a spiritual father, and so
And
we
just to add to that, like, there are a lot of great men of God in America I look up to, and despite the corruption going on, I thank God for people like even Pastor Michael Todd. I don't know if you've heard of Mike Todd, young in his 30s, He pastors a church called Transformation Church. Look him up. He's on Instagram. He's just released his first book, and it's been number one in America for about 2 weeks now. In relationship goals. But Michael Todd, Todd,
Okay.
it just goes to show how famous he is because a British guy is telling you about.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, he's in his
But
30s, great man of God, and he just did um, he did a service about racial reconciliation, which I recommend to go and check out. But also the likes of I watched TD Jake's conversation with Carl Lentz, pastor of Hillsong in New York.
okay.
I watched that one. Great conversation, honest conversation about what the church can do. And then who else? Joel Osteen just today he had a chat with Pastor John Gray. John Gray is a black man, pastor of Relentless Church. So there's loads of I've just in today and the past weekend I've been watching, great American influences in the kingdom of God. Having cross um, cross racial conversations about the way forward, and it's just been great to see. So I recommend go and check all those sermons out. I might send you links to them actually. But yeah, just to add on to what you're saying, just if,
Yeah. So we listened to Jake's this morning, and he did well. He addressed it. Not only just he didn't just address the racial problem, he addressed the issue of people rushing back into churches. You see, people rushing back into churches. You know, God shut the churches down. So you running back, he closed the doors. So if God closed the doors and you running back to open your doors, then you're going against God's word. No, listen. If there's a chance for us to congregate, even though they're doing it with the protests, because this COVID is not dead. So when they have the protests, it still raises the issue of spread. He as a pastor is a full agreement with the fact that he's not bringing his congregation back in there until it's safe. So he touched on the issue of race, but also the fact that until he gets the green light from the health department, he's not having people sitting in the pews. You know what I'm saying?
fair
So,
enough. Yeah.
but that's who I listen to. Yep,
Okay.
that's who my spiritual father is. So.
Awesome. That's awesome. I think we're gonna start rounding up now, but I want you just to just give an indication of what you're up to now. How's COVID been for you? How have you stayed occupied at home? You said that you've done some online workshops as well, and
Right.
yeah, just let us know. What have you been up to at home. What are your current plans regarding your youth work and just your work in general?
Well, what I've done is I went to a conference right before COVID about branding, and it talked about you have to have global awareness. Part of your business, you need global awareness. So when I left the conference, it was right before COVID hit. And so when I came home, immediately I started to send out emails. That's how I found you. And my mission is to get my message across the globe. And I have. I mean, since COVID hit, I've been on over 50 podcast shows and on many different platforms. So I've been on, New Zealand. You're in London, right? Right?
Sorry, again, sorry.
No, I said you're in London yourself, right?
I'm a what? I'm
Where are you
at
located?
home. What the government is not doing a great job at the moment in Britain. They've tried to make it clear that you know they're trying to ease lockdown a little bit. So now, I think previously the message was um, stay home. But now they're saying stay alert. So they're saying let people they're saying we can go out as much as we want, but we need to maintain social distancing. And a lot of people still can't go back to work yet. Um, Regarding school, they're trying to do it in increments. So certain year groups they're going to allow first. I think in about a month's time or something. I'm not sure. And then incrementally they'll start allowing more people to re-enter society. So it's I don't know. From my understanding, it's kind of in the air. I'm seeing all these protests happening, and I'm like, okay, social distancing and the the 2 meters apart that's gone out the window. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's weird.
yeah,
I'm still staying at home to stay safe, but every now and again I want to go out and go to the park or something. But really, I just want to stay at home most of the time, just to be in the safe zone.
right. But yeah, so anyway, so I've been speaking on podcasts across the globe, and so what I've been able to do during COVID is just self-reflect, reevaluate my business, and try to bring it to a new level. That's all.
Sorry, there we go. um, so yeah, so what word of encouragement would you want to leave for the listeners? And um, yeah, just moving forward, any word of any word of advice for white listeners or non-black listeners in terms of moving forward, specifically if they're believers. What should we all do, and what's your kind of ideas for the future in terms of your projects and what you feel God is calling you to do?
Well, I wrote a book. It's called Be Encouraged. All
Mm.
right. And it's written devotional style. So you pick a page, you read it, and you get motivated for the day. On the third page on there, I wrote this, and it's short-term thinkers plant gardens, long-term thinkers plant trees, eternity-minded thinkers plant themselves in the souls of others.
Whew. Say that again. Say that
Yeah,
again.
bro.
Say that again.
You want one more time?
Yeah. One more
Short
time.
term, short term thinkers plant gardens. Long term thinkers plant trees. Eternity minded thinkers plant themselves in the souls of others. You see, so my advice to your listeners and to you is to live a conscious life and think about how a person feels once they leave an interaction or conversation between you and them. So my goal when I leave people, a lady I know, or well, I don't know. I was reading a book. She said that when she leaves a room, she wants people to sniff like cologne or perfume and say, God was in this room. And so when I leave people, I want them to say to themselves, there was something about that guy that was different. And I think the world should be on a mission to do that, to live conscious and selfless lives and be bigger than themselves.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And what I like about that advice is easy for anyone to accept, regardless of where they are in their faith. It's just what positive impact are you leaving on people when you talk to people? Do you Are you empowering them or subtracting from them? And the goal
Yeah,
is to always empower people. The way I see it personally is the more you empower other people, the more you empower yourself, because
yeah.
reciprocation of positive energy. When you give positive energy, you get positive energy back. Um, so yeah, that's great advice, and I'll definitely remember that analogy you had about planting trees, planting gardens, planting trees, and then planting ourselves. It's one thing to plant something big, but if that thing is temporal, that will have its limit. It's important for us to plant ourselves in things that aren't as dependent on, you know, things that come and go, if that makes sense. So that's great advice. Thank you very much for giving that advice, and thank you just for this conversation we've had. I'm sure that the people who will listen to this will be enlightened. I'm going to put this on all podcast platforms as well so that people can listen back in their own time. But once again, thank you, Michael. And can you just let everyone know how they can support you and your work, where they can follow you, and if you have resources and the book you mentioned, where they can buy that and the name of it, etc.
Yeah, well, for my public speaking, they can get me on michaelarterberry.com. All right. For my nonprofit, they can come to youthvoicescenter.org. And then,
In the description, I think I put a link.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just put the links to my Facebook, my Instagram is CT Thunder. And I'm the type of guy, come and friend me, and you'll see I put out positive stuff on a daily basis. You know what I'm saying? So that's who I am. I got my book, Be Encouraged. They can get that on Amazon. And also my wife wrote a book about my life story, which is titled God Was Holding My Hand. So they can get that book on Amazon as well.
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right.
Yeah, I'll end our conversation here. I look forward to doing more conversations in the future, just so that you can check up on me and I can check up on you in terms of where we're heading next. I don't want to just start relationships and abruptly, so I'm definitely going to keep in touch with you, see how you're doing. And yes, thank you for blessing us with your words of encouragement. So,
all right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay. I'll just allow you to leave and then I'll round up.
Okay. All right, buddy.
Okay, bye.
So you take it easy, man.
Yeah,
I'll see
will.
you out there.
Yes, I will.
All right, brother. Later.
Bye. Awesome. So, guys, that was the end of episode 1 of season 2. And the good thing is you can watch this back on YouTube as well. So I know there's a lot of people who would want to watch this who aren't watching currently, as of the live broadcast. So, which is fine. So yeah, like, just share this video if you're watching. Share it with your friends. And yeah, let's just have a conversation about, the racial issues that are having. Let's be honest about them. Let's try and understand different perspectives. And we've got more content on the way. So I have a few more people who want to do interviews as well. Next week, I plan to talk with a friend of mine from uni. And his name is Aaron, and he's a white person, and we're gonna sort of delve into his perspective of all the things that are happening as well. And I'll be touching on a little bit more on how my approach to the whole thing is going on in terms of looking at the Bible, examples of the Bible, of reconciliation, cultural reconciliation. So I'll be touching more on that in the next episode, which should be next Sunday actually. So I'm thinking for the next few Sundays I'll be doing more of these live broadcasts. And I've got a debut single, well, not a debut single, a new single called My Formula. It's a song, and it's available for pre-order and pre-saving tomorrow. So just follow me on my Instagram, and then you'll hear some of that. In the weeks to come, the single is coming out on the 19th of June. So as of tomorrow, pre-sale and pre-order will be available. Thanks guys for listening, and next week I look forward to seeing you again around the same time with another guest on YouTube Live. God bless.